Hello, welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week, we'll bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
We want Interdependent Study to be a space where we're always learning with one another. And Damien is up this week for our 250th episode.
There it is.
What do you bring to the table today to celebrate 250 episodes?
How exciting that is. I have brought a couple of pieces from The Forge to the table for us to talk about today. So as I mentioned last week when I introed this, The Forge has recently partnered with an organization called Liberation in a Generation. Mm-hmm. And they've published a special edition focused on the importance and necessity of curbing corporate power and the influence that corporations and big business have had on our lives, our communities, and certainly the economy. And so we read two of the pieces in this series. The first was the introductory piece titled The Corporate Power of It All, which is by Adem, Sengal, and Emanuel, Nieves, who are both at the Liberation in a Generation organization. And then we also read a piece called The Contours of Corporate Power, which is a conversation between Katherine Diaz from Liberation in a Generation, interviewing two folks. First, Sofia Lopez from the Texas Organizing Project organization, and Corrine Hendrickson, who is a co-founder of the Wisconsin Early Childhood Action Needed organization. And both of these pieces were really great. Combined, they analyze the conditions that exist right now in our country that have marginalized communities and really all of us living under what's referred to in that introductory piece as the oppression economy, and the harm that this oppression economy has caused, the influence that the oppression economy has had on the rise of corporate power and political elitism. And these pieces, particularly that second piece in their conversation, also highlight what organizations are doing to resist and to fight back against corporate greed in their communities, which I think only compels me to want to check out the rest of this series because the case studies, if you will, that are highlighted in the second piece were really powerful. And I learned a lot about the work that these organizations are doing. And I think it would be amazing to continue to learn from what other organizations are doing across the country to combat this. So yeah, that's a brief intro of what we read for today. I'm going to stop talking here. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this series so far, having just read these two articles.
Yeah.
One of the things that's clear is how the motives for profit and constant growth of corporations leads to them absorbing more and more functions across our society to squeeze more and more money out of them and out of us.
Yeah.
Them being the functions and us being us, which is clear.
Yep.
In these two articles, there are examples of childcare and healthcare and general cost of living expenses.
Right.
And how much that's all increased in cost. And in the first article, The Corporate Power of It All, Adem and Emanuel say, quote, looking around in our economy, many of us know that the issue of unrestrained corporate power isn't limited to a few very powerful tech companies. Private equity companies and other financial institutions are also deploying a range of extraction strategies to siphon value from our communities in nearly every aspect of our economy, from consumer goods to healthcare, and funnel it to make the wealthy even wealthier. This has led to some of the largest corporate bankruptcies, mass layoffs, and other cost-cutting strategies that prioritize investor profits over everything else, including, in the case of the rising presence of private equity in nursing homes, tens of thousands of lives that have been lost prematurely.
Wow.
I think this captures so much of what it's like to live in this current moment in this oppression economy as they talk about. We're being squeezed to death so that more wealth can line the pockets of the people who are among the wealthiest people to ever exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, right? When you think about it, when you put it like that, and particularly the real life and death situation that they highlight there is so telling about where we are now and the current economy and conditions that exist right now.
Yeah, I mean, private equity investing in nursing homes seems draconian. It seems completely out of bounds, and yet it is clearly happening and has led to thousands of lives lost prematurely.
Absolutely.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed the introductory piece by Adem and Emanuel. I really appreciated their analysis of how present and powerful and influential corporate power is and has been on our society. So one of the quotes I pulled was this: "Everywhere we look, we can see and feel the influence of corporate power, which is controlling more of our lives, limiting our choices, and inflicting the worst impacts on the most vulnerable. This is exacerbated by the massive resources corporations and the wealthy elite are pouring into our political system to reinforce and maintain their power. Fueled by the 2010 Supreme Court decision in Citizens United, which ushered in unlimited corporate political spending, independent expenditures for federal elections, which are mostly funded by wealthy individuals, increased from $205 million in 2010 to $4.2 billion in 2024. The largest donors to the most recent presidential election were some of the country's richest individuals and tech oligarchs, leading to a handful of people having immense control over policymaking to favor their businesses in local, statewide, and federal elections." And so I appreciate your point there. I think this builds on it, talking about the ultra wealthy and these corporations are leading to our death. And they're doing that. The mechanism which they're using to do that is investing in our politicians, rigging the system against us and taking our politicians away from us and serving us. And those dollar amounts are insane. But that to me speaks to the power and the influence that they are allowed to have because they're investing so much in our politicians. And so we have this political system that is working for them and not us. It's not caring for or working for regular, everyday people. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the fast math there is that's a $4 billion increase in 14 years.
In 14 years.
That's hard to fathom how much money that is.
Right. And to think about all that wealth over those years and but comparing it to the lack thereof of wealth for regular everyday people.
Yeah. And one of the things that's important here is how the way business is done seems so, I think, neutral on its face.
Yeah.
And it ends up costing regular people more money.
Yeah.
So Corrine Hendrickson is talking about how the choices of insurance companies shapes a lot of what happens in childcare rates. And this is in the second article,
right,
which is an interview. And so she says, quote, "What I was finding is we were calling and calling all these different people. We found out that one insurance company only covers up to 6 children. Well, in Wisconsin, you're licensed for up to 8 children. Then another company that had been one of the most stellar ones is no longer covering family child care at all. So one of the people I spoke to kept calling, and she finally was able to find a company that would take her. But she had to move all of her other personal insurance over to that company, and it was costing her $6,000 more per year, which is $500 more a month. And being in a really rural area, she can't pass that cost off all onto her parents. So she's taking a pay cut to stay open, and she's now working a second job."
Wow.
I think this is an example that's really illustrative. We have someone who wants to and has managed a small business for childcare.
Right.
She's abiding by local laws and she needs insurance, and she doesn't feel she can pass the cost of that insurance off to her families. And so now she's working a second job.
Right.
All because of what? Some insurance companies noticed that their profit margins weren't as high as they could be.
Yeah.
And so we're supposed to believe that this is how all of this has to work, that insurance companies have to cover these small businesses and protect children. And ultimately, what is it costing us? Because that ends up being a monopoly.
Yeah.
And demanding that all of the coverage that you have be part of your small business coverage for your child care center also feels asinine.
Yeah.
Why is that part of your requirement if you're going to cost me $6,000 more per year?
Ooh.
That there's so many pieces of that don't make sense, and how completely frustrating is it for somebody who's taking care of children
Yeah.
all day, then having to work a second job?
I can't imagine.
Well, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, and it's fascinating to think about the human element of this and thinking about this manager of this childcare center thinking, well, I can't pass this cost along on to my parents. I know that they can't afford it. And so, they're making that decision to, well, I'm going to have to work this second job. And this is probably one of many examples that exist out there, right? Because of the relationship that exists between, childcare facilities and the relationships that they have with their families. And so if this is happening here, where else is it happening? And to what scale is it happening? And
Absolutely.
Only to make these insurance companies more rich than they already are.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm glad you shifted us to that second piece. I loved the conversation between Katherine, Corrine, and Sofia. It was just this wide-ranging conversation in terms of how corporations and the ultra-wealthy have influenced the political landscape and harmed communities and real people, and how to navigate, organize, and fight against what Katherine refers to as the contradictions of our economy, which is an idea that I really appreciated because that contradiction is real. We have to live and work within the economy that exists, but the fight for a better system is also happening and is also incredibly necessary. And so I appreciated their thoughts on what any and all of us can do here. So Katherine asks both Corrine and Sofia to share what regular, everyday people can do in this work, which I'm always compelled by because I'm like, that's all of us listening and talking right now. Yeah. And so Corrine says, quote, I would say just start and pick the one thing that you're most passionate about. Find people that you know who are connected to things and ask them, and they will get you connected to the appropriate group. The biggest thing is that so many of us feel passionate about so many things that we get lost in all of it. Like Sofia said, what's one thing that would change your life the most? Find the resources that are connected to that. That's what you can then focus on, and that will get you started. And then Sofia shares, quote, I think the thing I keep saying is talk to your neighbors. I was having a long conversation with someone yesterday. A lot of us are isolated, and much of that is by design. We've got a lot of things competing for our attention, and we're increasingly actually disconnected from one another. And I think we've got to be building together. We've got to create relationships that are rooted in shared and common interests, and to also constantly be asking the question, what's going to fix this? And don't be satisfied with the first answer that you come up with. We've got to push one another. We've got to embrace tension and healthy conflict because that's how we get to shared values and a shared vision for things that we can fight for together. And I just love those two pieces of advice and wisdom. I don't have much to add to that insight because I thought it was simple, but really brilliant and motivating. Figure out your issue, what you're passionate about, find your people, get to work.
Yeah. And I think it's so simple sounding.
Yeah.
And I think it is in some ways that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Do it. And there's all those things that hold you back from doing
Oh, sure.
it. And so
of course.
I get that it's not as simple as it sounds. And I think it is as simple as it
is.
sounds. There's a contradiction in that. But
right. Hey,
I think that exists. Yeah.
Well, but what I'm drawn most to is the idea of that. I agree with you completely, but imagine if we all did it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Imagine what would happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Corrine made some other great points in the interview.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to quote her again.
Okay.
She said, Sofia, like you were saying about things that divide people and make people angry and give somebody to blame instead of the people in power that are doing the things to us. It's very divide and conquer. Our state budget the last 3 times, so 6 years, has taken money away from our public schools. This year, they got a $0 per student increase, but the private voucher schools got $680 more per kid.
Wow.
So every school district's going to a referendum, and it's increasing property taxes. And I wanted to talk about this because it's sort of a spiritual continuation of our recent discussion about how sales tax is a bunch of Jim Crow bullshit.
Yeah.
Much like the recent Supreme Court decision to gut even more of the Voting Rights Act.
Yes.
So a state increasing the private school voucher program and school choice in general, which I believe we've talked about here, is a continuation of the white flight that happened in the wake of Brown v. Board in 1950.
Yes.
a bunch of schools were created in response to orders to desegregate, and those schools are now reaping the benefits of conservatives harping on about school choice and creating private school choice voucher programs that sends public money to private schools to fund these institutions, many of which were founded in a specifically white supremacist framework for that reason, to exist as a white school that was private and could not be desegregated by Brown v. Board. So just wanted to name it because as it came up, I was infuriated again about public money going to private institutions in this way and the blatant process of ignoring the public schools, which is so clear here, where there's a $0 increase for public schools and a $680 increase per kid for private voucher schools.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, ridiculous and infuriating are great words. And I think their analysis, again, they're so spot on about this being, this divide and conquer.
Yep.
It's intentional. It is absolutely drawing a wedge in between folks and only exacerbating the supremacy of it all.
Yep.
And I really appreciate you saying Jim Crow bullshit in our 250th episode. Good man. All right. Well, all of this is application, but let's formally go there. So how do these pieces in our conversation about them apply to our everyday lives and work? My application comes from something in the introductory piece about why the work to challenge and organize and fight against this oppression economy that we're in is so important, even though it's daunting. And I want to acknowledge that. So they say, quote, "By now you may be wondering if the odds are so stacked against the interest of everyday people, why should we bother thinking about, let alone challenging, entrenched concentrations of wealth and power among big business and the wealthy elites? That defeatism is exactly what they expect of us, making it easier for them to do what they want, when they want, and how they want, with little liability for their actions. Put simply, without challenge, we will continue to die prematurely, see our children robbed of quality care, be forced to work in precarious conditions, face unnecessary housing insecurity, have our needs ignored by a privileged few, and watch our community's potential drained. No corporation is worth that. Fortunately, history has shown us that we are capable of reining in outsized corporate power and reclaiming control of our economy and the rules that govern it. But such progress is only possible when we organize ourselves to break the grip of corporate power and wealthy elites over our economy and put power back in the hands of the people." And I'll be honest, I mean, they had me at that defeatism being the point. And to your point earlier about the divide and conquer strategy, it's all intentional and it's exactly what they expect of us, that defeatism part. But we can't be defeated. We can't stop fighting. And like they said, and like you talked about earlier, no corporation is worth seeing people die in nursing homes or seeing children left behind because we're not investing in public schools. And so I just thought that was really brilliant and an incredible call to action there. And I loved it. So, what about you?
That's great.
Yeah.
My application comes from the contours of corporate power when Katherine Diaz is responding to Sofia Lopez, and she says, "Thank you so much. Also, something you said about the nosiness. I feel like that's a key trait of good organizers, is that curiosity takes you so far." And I couldn't agree more. I think curiosity is such an important skill, trait, what have you. I think it's a skill to work on. Why are things the way that they are? What did I contribute to this moment that we're in? What are the conditions that contributed to the choices I had in front of me?
Yep.
That kind of curiosity can lead to a lot of great insight and ultimately powerful change, especially if you combine it with your earlier advice of finding your people and getting to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing that made me think of and where I thought you were going to go, but where you went was brilliant, but I think that curiosity also leads to our imagination and thinking about abolition and where we can go and what world we can dream of together and envision for ourselves. Yeah. So that curiosity is so important. I'm so glad you brought that.
Yeah, I think the curiosity, you can't do the imagination without the curiosity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's foundational.
Brilliant. All right, well, let's talk about homework. What do we want to do to continue our learning and unlearning work once we leave the table today? This was great, and so I would love for us to continue reading this great series from The Forge. So there's quite a few more pieces in this series. I'm going to name them. When Disaster Strikes, Housing Inequality and the Rising Threat of Disaster Capitalism. How We Beat Corporate Power Before, Lessons from Fights for Public Control of Banking and Broadband Infrastructure, How Our Money Feeds Corporate Power, The Opposite of Corporate Power is People Power, and finally, Inviting Communities to Take on Corporate Power Structures. And I don't know, there's something about those titles alone that are just incredible and make me really excited to want to read them, just in addition to obviously the incredible learning that we got from these first two pieces. So my homework is for us to continue with this great series throughout maybe the rest of this year.
Yeah, that sounds like great homework to continue the series. There's also a link in the Corporate Power of It All that talks about the oppression economy, which we've referenced a couple times.
Yeah.
And it's connected to Liberation in a Generation's framework, how they operate. So I want to learn more about their framework and see what they see as the difference between the oppression economy, which we exist in,
right,
and their vision for a liberation economy and how those things are different.
Yeah, it would be great to continue to learn from them because, you know, this partnership with the Forge has obviously produced some incredible pieces here. So I'd love to learn more from them. So that's great. Cool. All right. Well, that's our 250th episode. Folks, thank you so much for being with us on this ride.
Yes.
We are continuing to have so much fun with this. So thank you for listening and for joining us and for being in conversation with us. Aaron, you're up next time. What are you bringing to the table in our 251st episode? It's just as exciting.
Is it just as exciting?
Yes.
Less of a milestone, but
yes.
Our 251st episode will feature an article from Scallywag magazine called Mayday, Exporting the Southern Plantocracy. It's written by Sharonda Brown, Taya Troutman, and Arohi Sheth. And one of the summaries that I found starts with this, quote, anti-blackness sits at the foundation of Southern labor exploitation, and its legacy ensures that workers in the South remain underinsured and continue to face some of the poorest working conditions in the nation with lower wages and longer hours. Despite these conditions, union membership remains the lowest in Southern states, with only 6% of unionized workers across the entire region, in contrast to 11% elsewhere in the U.S. And so I think this combination of anti-blackness and anti-labor politics creates really terrible conditions across the South.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways that those things exist on purpose.
Yes.
And so I'm looking forward to reading this article and learning more from them and their analysis of how all of this is working in terms of the Southern plantocracy.
Yeah. Well, I love the path that we're on here. I think a lot of these things we're bringing week in, week out are so connected. And I see a lot of connection to this, to what we've talked about today and in past weeks. But also, we haven't talked about something from Scallywag in a while. So they always produce some really insightful, great stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. Very good.
Me too.
All right, folks. With that, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what we want you to do here. But in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Check us out on YouTube and sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you for listening for all 250 episodes. Woo! And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. And we'll talk to you next week.